History has no memory. It's people who carry stories forward. Some are true. Some were true once. Some just need to be told. In tonight's episode, you decide, is this based on truth, or is it all a lie? Before we descend, take a moment to subscribe. And in the comments, tell us where you're listening from. Maybe you're huddled under polar bear blankets in the dead of the Arctic winter. Maybe you're swinging in a jungle hammock, all wrapped up like a snack. Or maybe you're alone in a quiet room. Or so you think. The Atlas leads us into forgotten towns. Strange ruins, lost souls, impossible legends, places that slip between memory and shadow. Now, dim the lights. Let the world grow quiet, and step with me into tonight's story. Where the party ends, Venice's Plague Island. 1. In the year 421, so the stories say, Venice was born. A mere 4.34 billion years after the Earth was. But before the city rose from salt and tide, the lagoon was only a place of water and wind. Marsh birds hovered over the reed beds, egrets, ibises, cormorants, dragging lazy arcs across the sky, waiting to stab silver fish with their long beaks, while beneath the lilies, mullet and sardines scattered like sparks. The land itself barely qualified as such, just scattered shoals and tufts of silt that shifted with the season. There were no names for any of it. No stories, just quiet. One of those nameless tufts would one day be called Poveglia. At first, as with all things, it was innocent. A patch of land on a planet of water. Fishermen would rest there. Children would adventure or picnic. Families rode out in calm weather, laid blankets on the soft grass, and watched clouds crawl in from the Adriatic. No one lived there, no one needed to. It was a place without meaning, just a shore to land on, a pause in the lagoon. But the world of men does not leave purity alone for long. 2. As centuries passed, tides shifted, politically as much as literally. Rome fell. Invaders came. Huns, Goths, Lombards, each time the northern plains of Italy lit up with fire and blood. And each time the people ran. Where do you go when the land burns? You go to the sea. The Venetian lagoon was not very desirable. It was muck, insects, salt air, but it was safe. No horse could gallop through mud. No army could march through marsh, so the desperate did what desperate people do. They adapted. They drove thick cypress trunks into the seabed, millions of them, harvested from alpine forests, floated down river in bundles like corpses, stripped and hammered down, one beside the next, until they struck clay or stone. Upon that invisible skeleton they laid beams, boards, blocks, until eventually there were platforms, streets, then towers. The city didn't rise, it was pushed, hammered up from mud and panic, forged from exile, cemented by fear. The men who drove those piles had no name in history, but you can imagine them. Wake, row, hammer, eat, hammer, sleep, dream, and still, hammer. They drove trees into the lagoon until their hands split, and their backs curled like anchors. Some hammered themselves to death, then silence. No more blows. Venice became a miracle, a republic, a maritime empire. But beneath the gold domes and glinting gondolas, the city remained what it always had been. A forest of submerged trees, beneath the dream of building something from nothing. Many were old growth, centuries tall, wide enough around to circle 3 men with linked arms, felled, drowned, forgotten, and just beyond it, minutes away by boat, was the island progress forgot. Poveglia. 3. It began to change in the 1300s. Plague came to Europe, and cities built on closeness needed distance. Venice, ever clever, chose isolation. The plague did not knock. It flooded. It bloated tongues, blackened groins, softened gums until the teeth fell out. Even priests stopped giving last rites. And so laws were written, fast ones, merciless ones. Venice was a jewel, yes, but one ringed in death. The tides brought more than trade. They brought rats, fleas, a darkness no prayer could lift. The solution was simple: push it away. A mile from the edge of Venice, just far enough to forget. The island was chosen. It was still nothing then. Low earth, a few huts, a fishing shed. That was enough. They called it a lazaretto, a quarantine island. But quarantine was a soft word for what it became. The first boats crossed under cover of night. No one wanted to see. The sick were rowed across, their bodies wrapped in cloth, faces blistered and blackened. Some were ill, some were already dead. Some would die on the way. Children were curled in baskets. Mothers stuffed rags into their mouths to stop the screaming. The oarsmen, no plague masks not yet, ferried them like cargo. They were the literal death boat men, their jobs unmarked, unblessed. Some were probably joking, drinking as they rowed, oblivious to irony. The island got its first experience of men and began to sour. And when the bodies came faster than the rats could eat them, the fires began. At first, they built pits, but the ground filled quickly. They dug more. The canals ran thick with smoke and the smell of roasted meat. They built pyres. By the end of the first season, they weren't separating the dead from the dying anymore. The green grass was gone. The fires ate everything. Graves were dug, then abandoned. The soil was too wet. Sometimes they dug and found water, not earth, just holes in the sea. Bodies floated, so they tried to weight them with stone. That didn't always work. The dead would rise, lay in the sun, as if they were trying to tan their pale skin. Some say the ground, too, began to move, to bubble with the swell of decay. The island was no longer a place of rest. It was a furnace, a pit. It had earned a new name, the Island of the Dead. If you were suspected, you got the free ride. A cough, a fever, a nosebleed at the wrong time of day. Off you went. They told the sick they were being sent there to recover, or die. Most hoped for the first. No one expected anything but the second. The boats were state-run. You had no say. 4. The brothers were 12 and 9. Matteo and Silvio. Their parents were already gone. One neighbour claimed they'd coughed all night. Another swore they looked fine. No one waited to find out. They were taken before dawn, bundled in sacks. A soldier on the boat told them it was a holiday, that the fire was for bread. Silvio still had his wooden spinning top. Matteo carried a slip of paper with his family name. The island, now bent, didn't take long to bend them too. They were thrown in a tent with 17 others, men, women, one baby that never made a sound. The top went missing, the paper was used for kindling. The worst part, Matteo later whispered to another boy, wasn't the coughing, it was the sound of the carts. The wheels were made of iron, they shrieked across the stone like dying animals. That sound meant someone was coming, or going. Mostly going. The boys tried to hide, find beds and huddle beneath like at home. But there were no beds, just straw. They tried to run, but the island was small, and the guards had dogs, and the dogs had teeth. Some say Matteo lasted 3 days, others say a week. But no one really knows. No one wrote it down. They burned the names with the bodies. The plague came in waves, 1348, 1575, 1630. Each time the island filled with Matteos and Silvios, as if they were born again and again to suffer the same fate. An army of children to feed the fire. Each time the pits grew deeper. More than 160,000 people died in Venice from the plague alone. How many were brought to Poveglia, no one can say. But the soil is black. When fishermen cast their nets too close to shore, they sometimes pull up teeth. That's not a story. That's in the records. The top 2 meters of soil are said to be more than 50% ash and bone. And yet, after all that, they came back. The plague ended or slowed or changed its name. The ghosts of the brothers blew away with a soft wind. Venice grew again, and the island, dark as it was, remained. 5. By the 1700s, the Republic had collapsed. Napoleon came and went, never giving the world a good look at his right hand. The bones were left alone, the pits sealed, grass grew, birds returned. Even new cypress trees had taken root, ignorant of what the Venetians had done to their ancestors. Wild fennel pushed through the cracks, and Venice remembered its old trick. This time, not to house the dying, but the insane. The hospital was built, or rebuilt. It was called a psychiatric facility, though the word meant little. The architecture was meant to soothe. Columns, symmetry, open courtyards. Wards with oversized windows that flooded with light and looked over the lagoon. From the outside, the hospital looked peaceful, but inside the beauty had been boiled out. Windows were bolted shut, curtains, when there were any, hung stiff as bark. Doors creaked on purpose. The people who were sent there referred to it as l'ultima fermata, the last stop, l'isola del silenzio, the island of whispers, il posto dove si dimentica, the place where you're forgotten. There were few staff, fewer visitors. Patients came from across the region, those who saw visions or wept too often or simply no longer pleased their husbands. One of them was named Livia. She believed her hands were birds. 6, not wings, birds. 2 small white ones, a robin and a starling. She spoke to them gently in the mornings and wrapped them in cloth when the wind blew. First her husband called a priest, then a doctor, then the police. They brought her to Poveglia in 1922, just after the hospital officially opened. She was 27, she had no children, her eyes were dark and often wide. She didn't scream, didn't attack, she just spoke too often to her hands. And once, just once. Scratched a woman in the market after claiming her birds had been startled. Her diagnosis was hysteria with delusions. She came to stay. The husband remarried. 7. The hospital director at the time was a man named Dr. Lunetti. Educated in Milan, published in journals, wore linen even in winter. Because, he said, it made him feel like a Tahitian in the sun. But behind the title and the spectacles, there was something else. Behind the look was a looker, gazing back, a curiosity that had drifted into cruelty, and an island no one cared to visit, gave him freedom. He believed he could cure madness, not with love, not with rest, but with technique and precision. His favourites were the chair and the chisel. The records from that era are sparse, pages missing, names redacted, but whispers survived. They say he invented his own version of the lobotomy, done not through the temple but through the eye, that he opened skulls with tools meant for masonry, that he used chloroform when he remembered, that he recorded the sessions not on film but in notes, dense, written in a Latin so obscure they remain untranslated, that sometimes he took patients to the bell tower. Livia saw him only twice. The first time she wept before she entered the room, not from fear, but because, she said, the birds in her hands were shaking. Lunetti smiled, told the nurse to take her towards C, but he marked her file. A small red O. Her ward was one that held the quiet ones, the mostly passive. They were allowed to move around their rooms, sometimes even walk the halls. The other wards were more akin to prisons. Most everyone was strapped down. The lucky ones in chairs, the unlucky in beds, the very unlucky in closets. There were so many rules, even the perfectly sane couldn't remember them. Don't touch anyone. Don't loiter. Don't raise your voice. And never fall in love. Life was dull. You lived the same day over and over, until you were tired of that day, and eventually tired of living. Meals came on metal trays. Bread like a wet sponge, broth like the bowl had been dipped in the swamp. If you didn't eat, the nurse would note it down. If you ate too quickly, she'd note that too. Her favourite place was the main room, where she'd stand face pressed against the tall window. 2 boys often played in the yard, kicking a black ball. They must have been inmates too. One mostly ran in circles, while the other kicked the ball at him, then sullenly went to fetch it, so he could do it again. The willows swayed behind them, and beyond that, empty skies. Freedom had a smell, she'd tell herself, even if she couldn't remember it. Outside was life that was green, and water that splashed blue. Inside you were kept safe from the world, from rain, from anything alive. Well, there was a plant once, in their bedroom by the door, but someone had eaten it. Eventually the staff would find her, standing too close to the glass, petting the birds in her sleeves. If she knew someone was coming, she tried to keep them hidden. She'd been marked as a hand-wringer. That was noted, everything was noted. They would lead her back to her room, gently but firmly, because touching the glass was against the rules too. One of her roommates was a girl, maybe 15. She didn't laugh at the birds. She even claimed to see them sometimes. But at night, the girl would whisper things. She said she once saw all the patients' heads fall off their bodies. All of them, all at once. Then the heads stuck out their tongues, hopped down the halls on them, and had a proper dance in the courtyard under the moon. The second time Livia met with the doctor, she did not return. The nurses said she ran, said she jumped from the tower. Her body was found on the stones below, arms outstretched, fingers curled, as if perching. But the truth is harder to find, because a week later Lunetti himself fell from that same bell tower. 8. No one saw it happen. One nurse, fired shortly after, said she heard voices inside. A man arguing with a woman, the sound of birds, a crash, then silence. Some say he slipped, others that he jumped. But the rumour that caught fire was about their affair, that when she met him again, she had told him that his hands were foxes, nervous, clever, always looking for a way out. That she confessed to her roommate she fell in love with his hands first, then with the rest of him. She followed him everywhere, not like a ghost, instead a second shadow. What happened that night, no one can say for sure. Maybe they fought, maybe she begged him to help her build a boat and escape. Maybe he told her he never loved her. But when the scream came, it echoed down the halls like someone tearing linen in half. When they found him, he was still alive. Legs shattered, spine bent, eyes wide. He whispered nonsense for 3 days before he died. His last words were almost clear: "The island will never let me leave." That was the rumour. After that, the tower was sealed, the bell removed, the stairs collapsed, and still, some nights the sound of the bell returns. Tourists say they've heard it, though no one climbs that tower anymore. Locals don't speak of it. They don't need to. Because Venice, for all its romance and light, knows its shadows. And Poveglia is more than shadow. It is wound. By the 1960s, the hospital was abandoned, doors left open, beds still made, records stacked like kindling. The island closed, but it didn't empty. 9. They come to Venice by the tens of millions now. By plane, train, cruise ship. They flood across the causeway and spill into the narrow lanes, pushed by each other towards St. Mark's and the Bridge of Sighs. Each equally desperate to find, photograph and prove they once existed and saw a faraway place. Like tidewater, rolling their suitcases over stones carved 600 years ago. They buy glass from Murano, lace from Burano, masks with feathers, masks with gold, beads, or all three. They lick stracciatella gelato on the bridges and toast Prosecco in the shadows of cathedrals, take selfies with the pigeons they scare. They whisper about ghosts in gondolas, and now, because there are so many of them, Venice has begun charging them. Day passes, tourist taxes, entry quotas. Not to make money, but to breathe. Because Venice, for all its magic, is drowning under the weight of being loved too much. Today, few Venetians live in Venice at all. It is a floating hotel that vomits money. And yet, just a few minutes away by water taxi, sits an island no one wants to visit. An island full of Venetians, though dead, that still welcomes the living just to feel the heartbeat again. 10. Poveglia. A spit of land you can see from the promenade, yet still, somehow, invisible. Between Lido and Giudecca, Locals know it, boatmen avoid it, tour guides skip it. Even on the clearest days, it seems to wear a fog of its own. There are no restaurants, no shops, no lights at night. Just ruins, birds and silence. The last legal residents left in the 1960s. Since then, it's been a kind of exile. Abandoned, not by accident, but on purpose. Because even the most rational minds find something wrong there. The air is still, but not peaceful. The buildings crumble, but don't fall. The walls are covered in ivy, but nothing roots deep. It's as if the earth is restless, or waiting. In the early 2000s, an Italian family tried to buy it, restore it, make it into a home. They left after one night. No one has ever lived there again. Legends multiply when left alone, and Poveglia has had centuries of solitude, that you can hear screaming from the bell tower, even though it no longer has a bell. It's said the moon disappears when you stand on the island, that you can see it from every other place in the lagoon, but not from there, as if the island erases even light. 11. Still, every year someone tries. Ghost hunters, thrill seekers, paranormal influencers with cameras and sage. They sneak onto the island by rented boat, stay a night, leave in the morning with wild eyes and shaky footage. Most don't say much, a few post videos. One woman wept through her entire interview and refused to speak of it again. There is no police tape, no wall, but the warning is clear. No one is meant to stay there long. The island isn't just abandoned, it is shunned. Because while Venice thrives on beauty and theatre, Poveglia is something else. It is memory. Not the kind you frame or celebrate, but the kind you bury and pray does not follow you home. Some say the island is a mouth, that the pits still open and close in the heat, that the wind brings voices, that the bell tower still dreams. It is not evil, just full. Of names, of screams, of small bones and stitched skulls, of red O's in ledgers, of birds in hands. Today it sits, this forgotten island, not floating, but held by old wood, by old wounds, by every story that will never fully leave it. And on still nights, the wind still smells faintly of fennel and fire. Was it true? Or just a well-told lie? Tell us what you believe in the comments, and why. We know many of you listen late at night, sometimes while trying to fall asleep. Let us know where you're listening from, and whether this story kept you awake, or gave you good dreams. And one more thing, if you know a rare or hidden place, a ruin, an old legend, or a forgotten town you'd like us to cover, share it in the comments. Your suggestion might become part of the Atlas. If you enjoyed wandering these forgotten corners, subscribe, and join us again next time for another journey into the unknown.